In times when Mr. Harvey was too ill to record his broadcast, he turned that task over to the creator and sole writer of the rest of the story, his son, whom he affectionately called Young Paul. Here's Paul Harvey Jr.
Now, the rest of the story. Sam and Helen met and fell in love at 17. But those were the Depression years, hard times. It would be wise to wait for marriage until those times had passed. So they waited 8 long years. Joe earned money playing semi-pro football and baseball. Helen got a radio job. And when the waiting had passed and their I-do's had been said, Sam and Helen bought a house on a quiet street in Englewood, New Jersey, and Sam went into the tire business. Their first child was Ellen. Then came Sam Jr., and Margaret, and Ann, and Joe, 5 beautiful children. Sam and Helen's backyard became a playground for their own youngsters and for their youngsters' friends. It was a very happy time. And then one day Helen came home from the doctor's. Sam was impatient for the news, and Helen was smiling. The test had come back positive. Helen was pregnant with her 6th child. So Sam smiled too, and he embraced his wife. But then the smiles vanished. It was a bit late in life for Helen to be bearing children. At 42, she was in excellent health, but the statistics were against her, and accordingly, the doctor had informed Helen of the risks. The option of a therapeutic abortion loomed unspoken. And yet, I want to have this one last child, Helen told Sam. And Sam understood. Helen's friends were not so easily convinced. Many questioned her wisdom in getting pregnant in the first place. She and Sam had so many lovely children, they said. What was the point of bearing yet another child with her physical safety at issue? One busybody acquaintance went even further. It was disgusting to have a baby at her age, she told Helen. Well, that did it. Until then, Helen had harbored her own doubts and fears, had wondered if perhaps it would have been wiser to avoid the conception of a 6th child. But now all at once an intemperate comment, one ugly, utterly inappropriate word, had jolted her awake. God had sent this one last child to her. It was not disgusting. And Helen would give it life, and she would live to care for it as she had lived to care for all the others. Despite the medical advancements since Helen's decision, a woman past 40 and pregnant is still naturally apprehensive. Risks to the unborn increase even when the father is past 40 or so, we're now learning. So imagine Helen's initial apprehension. She was already the mother of 5 healthy children. There was no reason to try for a 6th. But Helen wanted this one last child, and so she would accept the risks, and she would see it through. Helen's pregnancy progressed normally. First and second trimesters included all the familiar aspects she had experienced 5 times before. During the 3rd trimester, Helen's doctor watched carefully for the danger signals, for the many warnings which might forecast disaster for mother or baby. But on this path, all the lights were green, and the day arrived, and Sam drove Helen to the hospital, and John Travolta was born. Only now you know the rest of the story.
And now the rest of the story. I'm always curious to learn how someone became famous. Was it due to their hard work? Did it all come down to luck? Did he or she just happen to be in the right place at the right time? Or was it destiny? John Travolta began acting at a young age but had a long, slow rise to stardom. John's mother, Helen, had been a singer, actor, and director and eventually became a high school drama teacher. All of Helen and Sam's children were interested in acting. It was practically bred into them. Early on, John Travolta began taking dancing lessons, which certainly came in handy in the following decade. In 1966, 12-year-old John Travolta got the part of the young boy in Frank Gilroy's play Who'll Stop the Plowboy at the New Dimension Theater in Inglewood, New York. The play was about a man named Albert Cobb whose life was saved during World War II by an army buddy. The buddies met again 15 years later. Now, his army buddies gave him the nickname Plowboy because he was always talking about buying a farm after the war, World War II. But the farm didn't work out, and he had been working for years as a meter reader for the electric company. Albert Cobb was trapped in a bitterly unhappy marriage. 2 days before Christmas, Plowboy received a visit from Larry, the man who saved his life. As Albert told his wife, he was wounded and lay bleeding to death because his buddies were pinned down by enemy gunfire. When the commander called out, "Who'll save the Plowboy?" no one answered. Then Larry rushed out to rescue Albert. And though he was seriously wounded himself, he still managed to carry the Plowboy back to safety. Newspapers reported that young John Travolta had a pivotal role in the play, but I could find no more information on his part in the play. The play was a hit. Now, John wasn't the only Travolta to act on the stage. By this time, his sister Ellen appeared in Gypsy. His sister Margaret appeared in the Inglewood production of My Fair Lady. When newspaper reporters mentioned John Travolta, they often mentioned that he was of the Inglewood theatrical family. In March 1969, 3 years after Who'll Save the Plowboy, John Travolta was one of 50 actors, singers, and dancers cast in the stage production of Bye Bye Birdie at the Directors Theater in Oradell, New Jersey. In 1970, John Travolta began a hobby that he's continued to enjoy throughout his life. He was among a group of Dwight Morrow High School students who enrolled in a course called Introduction to Aviation, which was taught by, his art teacher, who's also a pilot, Elizabeth Patton. The Hackensack, New Jersey Record reported that one student, sophomore John Travolta, is soaring with interest. Exposed to Miss Patton's enthusiasm, he has started to work on a pilot's license at Teterboro. Miss Patton's class was designed to teach students how to read maps, decode weather symbols, and calculate arrival times with wind and weather conditions in mind. In this newspaper photo, John Travolta is on the left holding an aviation flight computer, a form of slide rule used in aviation to calculate fuel burn, wind correction, time en route, ground speed, among other things. In the article, a reporter asked Miss Patton if she would ever fly a 747. She quipped, "Only as a passenger." Well, John Travolta learned to fly a 747 and is one of the few non-commercial pilots in the world who is licensed to fly the jumbo jet. Sometime in 1971 or 72, John Travolta quit school to focus on acting. In March of 1972, John Travolta appeared as a Marine called Griggs in the play Rain at the off-Broadway Astor Palace Theater. By this time, John Travolta had appeared in several television commercials. He appeared in the television shows Emergency, Owen Marshall, Counselor at Law, and The Rookies. Late in 1972, John Travolta was cast in a play for which he will be forever linked. Grease was a spoof on the early rock and roll era of the late 1950s. In this photo, Ray DeMatteis, Judy Kaye, and John Travolta, that's him on the right, are singing a song from the play, Look at Me, I'm Sandra Dee. The lead character, Danny, was played by, no, not John Travolta, but Jeff Conaway. John Travolta played 2 different minor characters in the play, Duty and Roger. Critics agreed that the best dancer on the stage was not John Travolta, but Ray DeMatteis. While the stage production of Grease ended, John Travolta probably thought little more about the story and just moved on to another acting job. And that next acting job came in 1974 with a small part in the stage musical of Over Here, which was set in the big band era of the early 1940s. The stars of the musical were Maxine and Patty Andrews, the 2 surviving sisters of the original Andrews Sisters trio. John Travolta's name normally appeared in a long list of other actors in the play. However, one newspaper said, Another youngster, 20, with a nifty chance for stardom is John Travolta from the Inglewood, New Jersey theatrical family who plays Misfit in the smash Andrews Sisters Nostalgia Poppin' Over Here. John's no acting misfit, full of youthful charm and talent, and he's paid his dues. But 1975 would be John Travolta's big year. He was cast as Billy Nolan in the horror film Carrie. In the film, Billy and his girlfriend are the instigators of the famous scene in which they douse Carrie with pig's blood. If you've seen the film, you know that Carrie gets her revenge. But this wasn't John Travolta's breakthrough role. On September 9th, 1975, a new sitcom was broadcast on ABC which would make John Travolta a household name. The sitcom was set around a remedial high school class of presumed losers who refer to themselves as the Sweat Hogs. John Travolta played Vincent Vinnie Barbarino in Welcome Back, Kotter. Now, if you're like me, you could almost hear this photo. John Travolta went on to star in a number of hit films including Saturday Night Fever, Grease, Urban Cowboy, the Look Who's Talking films, Pulp Fiction, Broken Arrow, Face Off, The General's Daughter, Swordfish, Hairspray, and many, many more. But he's not done yet. His most recent film, Cash Out, has just come out and I'm anxious to see it. Do you have a favorite John Travolta film? I'm Brad Dison. Thanks for watching. And now you know the rest of the story.